Millionaire husband's pregnant wife thought he was faithful until she found out about his mistress. They seemed like the perfect couple, a power duo that graced every high-profile charity gala, always arm in arm, smiling for the cameras. Clarissa Farnsworth was the envy of every socialite in town, refined, dazzling, and wealthy beyond imagination. Her husband, Sebastian Farnsworth, was hailed as a genius entrepreneur, a philanthropist who rubbed shoulders with the likes of Bill Gates and Richard Branson. Their fairy tale union appeared unbreakable until Clarissa discovered a secret that shattered the facade of loyalty she once cherished. Hidden within their lavish world was a betrayal so deep that no amount of money or influence could fix it. Buckle up, because this story is about to get explosive. Clarissa Farnsworth was born Clarissa Wellington, the only child of famed hotel magnate Lawrence Wellington. Renowned for his real estate ventures across Europe, Lawrence instilled in her both a strong sense of business and a tender heart for those less fortunate. Raised in a sprawling estate outside London, Clarissa could have become the stereotypical rich heiress, spoiled, self-absorbed, drifting through life with no true aim. But from an early age, she clung to her mother's example. Evelyn Wellington was a gentle philanthropist who quietly donated to orphanages and women's shelters under various pseudonyms, never seeking the public eye. Clarissa, moved by her mother's humility, grew up believing wealth was a tool for helping others, not a license for egotism. After finishing her education at Oxford, Clarissa ventured to New York to work with UNICEF, focusing on educational programs in underprivileged areas. It was an act that raised eyebrows among her high society friends, who expected her to settle into a comfortable role in her father's enterprise. But Clarissa was determined to carve out her own identity. She spent 3 years volunteering in challenging regions, witnessing the stark reality of poverty. Those experiences molded her spirit, and upon returning home, she discovered a new purpose: to create her own charitable foundation for women's education. But life has a way of weaving unexpected threads into the tapestry of our plans. At a charity gala in London, an event hosted by Sir Jonathan Crawley in support of the Royal Children's Hospital, Clarissa stumbled upon the man who would become her greatest joy, then her greatest sorrow. Sebastian Farnsworth was introduced to her by a mutual friend, Lady Isabel Montague. Sebastian was already making headlines back then, a financial prodigy who had turned a modest inheritance from his grandmother into a thriving hedge fund. People whispered reverently about his golden touch. The rumor mill claimed that if Sebastian Farnsworth invested in a project, it would inevitably blossom into a fortune. He was tall, magnetic, and possessed a quiet confidence that intrigued Clarissa. They spoke about philanthropy, sustainable business, and the future of humanitarian aid. He listened intently as she shared her dreams of establishing her own foundation. Sebastian seemed more than eager to offer advice, even potential financial backing. By the end of the gala, they agreed to meet again to discuss her proposed foundation in more detail. That second meeting took place in a chic cafe in Mayfair, and it felt more like a date than a business consultation. Conversation flowed easily between them. He told her tales of how he had grown up in a modest suburban home before inheriting his grandmother's estate. Clarissa, unaccustomed to men who truly listened and appreciated her intellect, found herself irresistibly drawn to his gentle manner. Within months, they were inseparable, attending events together, their names cropping up in tabloids as the New It couple. By the time Sebastian proposed, whisking her away on a surprise weekend trip to the Lake District, complete with a romantic boat ride at sunset, Clarissa was already convinced her life would be perfect by his side. In her eyes, marriage was not just a union of hearts, but a partnership of ideals, of philanthropic intentions to shape the world for the better. Little did she know how drastically that vision would crumble in the not-so-distant future. Their wedding was the event of the season. Guests flew in from across the globe. Dignitaries, celebrities, and business moguls filled the Farnsworth ancestral mansion in the English countryside. The tabloids buzzed for weeks, capturing every detail from Clarissa's exquisite Vera Wang gown to the rumored $1 million floral arrangements. People marveled at how the Farnsworths had spared no expense, even flying in a rare orchestra from Vienna to entertain the guests. Yet, behind the opulent facade, Clarissa's philanthropic spirit remained steadfast. Instead of a typical wedding registry, she and Sebastian launched a charitable campaign, urging guests to donate to various charities dear to their hearts, particularly those dedicated to children's education and healthcare. Overnight, their union wasn't just a celebrity spectacle, it became a fundraiser that raked in millions for noble causes. The young couple shone as philanthropic visionaries, a refreshing change from the usual extravaganza of idle wealth. When they returned from their honeymoon in Santorini, they got to work. Sebastian supported Clarissa in officially founding the Evelyn Wellington Foundation, named after her late mother, focusing on educating underprivileged girls around the world. Sebastian's hedge fund soared to new heights. His name became synonymous with brilliance. Major corporations and wealthy families sought him out for financial guidance. He was soon invited to speak at conferences where he shared the stage with real heavyweights like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. Success followed success. Their personal fortune ballooned, granting them membership in every prestigious club you could imagine. They were invited to exclusive gatherings in Davos, philanthropic summits in Tokyo, and high-stakes business meetings in Dubai. Clarissa, far from being just another socialite, sat on panels discussing global education, forging alliances with powerful women like Michelle Obama and Oprah Winfrey. The Farnsworths were the golden couple, and wherever they went, cameras followed, eager to document this modern fairy tale. But, as the years went by, subtle changes seeped into Sebastian. Where he once thrived on the satisfaction of moral, altruistic endeavors, a new hunger for prestige began to show. He kept long hours, citing international calls, emergency deals, or pressing business matters. Clarissa, busy with her foundation and their philanthropic engagements, overlooked these warning signs. She believed his dedication was fueled by the same convictions they once shared. She used to joke that Sebastian was married to his phone, but she never questioned his loyalty to her, at least not then. There were fleeting moments, though, when uncertainty cast its shadow. Sebastian would forget important dates, like the anniversary of her mother's passing or the scheduled launch of a critical scholarship program. Once, he missed Clarissa's keynote speech in Zurich because of an urgent investor crisis that demanded his full attention. But whenever she confronted him, he'd shower her with heartfelt apologies and grand gestures like a surprise diamond necklace or an opulent weekend getaway to compensate for his absence. Clarissa, still enchanted by the memory of the man she had married, forgave him time and again. Beyond these minor hiccups, life maintained its gleaming veneer. They bought a breathtaking penthouse in Manhattan, often hosting dinners for the social elite. Among the illustrious guests were real philanthropic luminaries, such as Michael Bloomberg, who offered them additional avenues for global charitable contributions. The Farnsworth brand appeared unstoppable. Clarissa was convinced that underneath Sebastian's ambitious exterior, his love for her and for their shared cause still burned bright. It would take more than a hint of neglect or a skipped event to make her question the sanctity of their marriage. And yet, sometimes the loudest alarms ring silently. Under the lush exterior of glamorous parties and philanthropic triumphs, small cracks began appearing in the foundation of their marriage. A text message left unexplained. A rushed conversation on the phone that abruptly ended when Clarissa walked into the room. Familiar cologne on Sebastian's collar, yet it smelled just a shade different from his usual brand. All these were small anomalies, easily explained away if one wanted to believe wholeheartedly in a fairy tale. Clarissa believed in that fairy tale until it was ripped from her grasp. Clarissa was never prone to paranoia, but she was intuitive enough to sense changes in her husband's demeanor. While Sebastian had always been consumed by work, he now seemed distant in a way that words alone couldn't capture. His eyes seldom met hers for more than a moment before darting to his phone or laptop. He attended dinners, fundraisers, and galas as if in a daze, constantly checking messages as if expecting a call from someone more important. At first, Clarissa brushed off these observations as the side effects of mounting stress. Sebastian's hedge fund was taking on massive deals, from investing in developing markets to guiding high-profile celebrities in safeguarding their wealth. This expansion demanded international travel. Clarissa would hear about Sebastian jetting off to Singapore for a negotiation, only to find out he'd actually landed in Hong Kong. It didn't seem like deception so much as confusion, easy to mix up details when you're dealing with multiple time zones and crises. Then there were the abrupt mood swings. One evening, after a tense phone call he refused to discuss, Sebastian flew into a fit when Clarissa simply asked if everything was all right. He snapped that she was suffocating him with questions. Shocked and hurt, Clarissa retreated, leaving him alone in his office. Later that night, he apologized profusely, blaming the outburst on intense business pressure. Clarissa felt reassured by his contrition. After all, they had weathered stressful storms before without losing faith in one another. But deep inside, the seeds of suspicion sprouted. She noticed how Sebastian would meticulously erase his messages, something he had never bothered with before, or how he began asking for more privacy, installing new security measures on his devices. Clarissa, usually too preoccupied with her foundation, started paying closer attention, though she felt torn. She respected boundaries and believed in trusting her spouse. Still, her instincts whispered that something was off. In an attempt to reclaim their closeness, Clarissa planned a surprise weekend in the French Riviera, a nostalgic trip to the place they had spent part of their honeymoon. She arranged everything in secret, envisioning the joyous moment when she'd present him with plane tickets over a romantic candlelit dinner. But the night of her grand reveal, Sebastian came home past midnight, having forgotten their dinner date entirely. She didn't even have a chance to announce her surprise as he rushed upstairs to shower, still messaging someone on his phone. Sitting alone in the darkened living room, Clarissa felt a pang of heartache. This was not the man she married. The old Sebastian would have dropped everything to celebrate even the smallest milestones with her. When she finally made her way to their bedroom, Sebastian lay in bed, turned away, with his phone resting on the bedside table. She glimpsed the faint glow of the screen displaying an unanswered text, but the sender's name was obscured. The uneasy feelings only grew. Clarissa confided in her closest friend, Amelia Greywood, an attorney she had known since childhood. Amelia listened thoughtfully, cautioning Clarissa not to jump to conclusions. "Stress does strange things to people," Amelia said. "Have an honest talk with him. Let him know your concerns." Clarissa nodded. Honesty was the cornerstone of their relationship from the start, wasn't it? Yet, every time she tried to open a conversation, Sebastian deftly sidestepped it or drowned her in affectionate gestures until she forgot her own questions. But just like a wound left untreated, the doubts festered. Clarissa resolved that she would get to the bottom of this one way or another. Miles away in a different social sphere, Aria Levesque sipped a glass of champagne at the Châteauneuf-du-Pape vineyard in France. She gazed at the rolling countryside, her thoughts drifting to Sebastian Farnsworth. Aria was many things: elegant, cunning, and ruthlessly ambitious. Born in a modest family in Lyon, she had clawed her way through society by leveraging her beauty, charm, and wits. She was no stranger to relationships with affluent men, gleaning from each liaison something intangible she could use in her ascent. But Sebastian was different. Aria found him refreshing, not just because of his wealth, but for the mystique around him, the philanthropic side that contradicted the cutthroat world of high finance. She met him in Monaco during a business conference, one of those glitzy, star-studded affairs where millionaires rubbed shoulders with supermodels and playboys. Aria had been accompanying another businessman as his associate, though she loathed the euphemism. She was, for all intents and purposes, a social climber using any means available to ascend. Yet Sebastian transfixed her. His aura of controlled power sparked a challenge within her she had rarely felt. The affair began innocently enough, light, flirting over cocktails, a private conversation by the hotel pool, heated looks exchanged across the lavish banquet hall. But innocence quickly dissolved into something more tangled. Sebastian, usually guarded, opened up about his frustrations. He felt weighed down by the image of perfection he had to maintain with Clarissa. "She's too good, too flawless," he had confessed, swirling a glass of whiskey. "It's like living in a museum, always careful not to disturb anything." Aria listened, enthralled. She offered sympathy, validating feelings he was too ashamed to admit to anyone else. By the end of the conference, they had shared a passionate night in his penthouse suite. Sebastian swore it was a one-time slip. Aria pretended to agree, even though she sensed it was the start of something bigger. Over time, as they continued to meet in secret, Aria coaxed out more of Sebastian's vulnerabilities. He revealed how he sometimes felt overshadowed by Clarissa's philanthropic brilliance, how it seemed that every major figure they met was drawn to her more than to him. "I'm proud of her, don't get me wrong," he insisted, "but sometimes I want to be recognized for who I am, not just as her husband." Aria, adept at playing the perfect confidant, latched on to that hidden insecurity. She complimented his intelligence, admired his cunning business strategies, and fueled his need for recognition. Their affair deepened, becoming a potent mix of secret desire, flattery, and emotional dependency. Sebastian gifted her with expensive jewelry, Cartier bracelets, Tiffany pendants, bribes of affection and guilt. Aria was savvy enough to never request anything outright, letting Sebastian's conscience fill her pockets. Still, there was a limit to how hidden such an affair could remain. Aria, always 2 steps ahead, had started documenting their liaisons' photos, texts, even discreet audio recordings. Insurance for the future, she told herself. Not that she intended to blackmail him, at least. Not yet. But she had learned from bitter experience that powerful men could discard you in the blink of an eye. She intended never to be powerless again. In public, Aria maintained a profile that wouldn't raise eyebrows. She had an Instagram account brimming with picturesque travel photos, each seemingly innocent. Friends in high places. Networking at exclusive events. She had no obvious connection to Sebastian Farnsworth to the outside observer, but behind the scenes, her phone overflowed with messages and missed calls from him, intimate words and desperation. And so the stage was set for the storm that would soon engulf all their lives, Clarissa's, Sebastian's, and Aria's. For while Clarissa remained in the dark, Aria meticulously mapped her path to greater influence, and Sebastian found himself torn between guilt, desire, and the hollow comfort of his secret life. Clarissa's suspicions soon turned to restlessness. She could no longer ignore the inconsistencies piling up. calls abruptly ending, strange credit card charges for lavish dinners at restaurants she'd never been to, and Sebastian's constant travels that never matched up with his official itinerary. After her conversation with Amelia, Clarissa resolved to have the talk with Sebastian, but every time she tried to address it, fate conspired to break the moment: a sudden phone call, a pressing business meeting, or Sebastian's temper flaring at the mention of interrogation. It wasn't until one night at their Manhattan penthouse that Clarissa decided enough was enough. She planned a simple dinner, cooking his favorite dish, coq au vin, and waiting for him at the dining table. He arrived past 9, tie loosened and eyes weary. There was a bouquet of roses in his hand, a gift that felt more like a peace offering than a romantic gesture. She motioned for him to sit. "Sebastian," she began, her voice wavering just slightly, "we need to talk." He appeared at once, guarded. "Can it wait until I shower? I had a terrible day." "No," Clarissa interrupted, softly but firmly. "I've been waiting for this talk for weeks." He sighed and set the roses down. As he did, Clarissa felt her resolve waver. She loved him. She truly did. She didn't want to ruin their dinner with accusations. But the truth needed to come out. Gently, she expressed her concerns, how he had become distant, how there were too many unexplained expenditures, suspicious phone calls, and missed dates. Sebastian's expression hardened, but he allowed her to finish. "Clarissa," he began, carefully choosing his words, "you have every right to worry, but I promise you, there's no one else. The business has been going through ups and downs, and I might have made some unwise decisions." Her heart pounded. Was he gambling their fortune away? "What do you mean by unwise decisions?" He quickly clarified that he'd taken larger risks in the hedge fund, strategies that could backfire. The late nights, cryptic calls, and erased messages, he insisted these were related to secret business deals he was working on, deals that required absolute confidentiality. "I didn't want you to fret. I hope to resolve them on my own." Clarissa studied him carefully. His gaze was steady, yet there was a flicker of something she couldn't quite read. Relief washed over her, but it was tempered by a nagging suspicion that not all was being revealed. Still, with tears in her eyes, she allowed him to embrace her. "I just want to know you're safe," she whispered. "Always," he said, holding her close. "I promise, Clarissa." For a fleeting moment, it felt as though everything was back to normal. They shared a subdued dinner, making small talk about the foundation and upcoming charitable events. Sebastian even laughed when she told him about a humorous incident at her latest board meeting. By the time they finished, Clarissa thought maybe she'd been overreacting. Maybe it truly was just business stress. She decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Later that night, as Sebastian slept soundly, Clarissa found her thoughts drifting to the future. They had faced adversity before: negative press, corporate hostility, personal tragedy, but had always stood strong. Perhaps this was just another test of their bond. She turned to look at his sleeping form, reminded of the man who once spontaneously danced with her in the middle of a deserted street in Paris. The man who'd proposed with trembling hands, afraid she might say no. The man who, just hours earlier, had explained away every single suspicion she had. And yet, Clarissa couldn't quite stop the tiny voice in her head repeating, "He's lying." Though she wanted more than anything to ignore it, that voice grew louder in the quiet darkness. Days turned into weeks. Clarissa threw herself into the Evelyn Wellington Foundation's latest project, a scholarship program aimed at disadvantaged young women in Southeast Asia. She found solace in her work, in the tangible results of her efforts to change lives. Yet the tension at home never fully dissipated. Sebastian was polite, occasionally affectionate, but there was a layer of distance that lingered like a subtle perfume in the air. One evening, Clarissa hosted a small gathering at their penthouse to celebrate the scholarship program's successful launch. Guests included board members of the foundation, close friends, and a few high-profile donors. Among them was Sir James Holcombe, a revered philanthropist who had introduced Clarissa to Bill and Melinda Gates years prior. As Clarissa mingled, ensuring everyone felt welcome, she noticed Sebastian making small talk with guests. He looked the part of a gracious host, but every so often he'd check his phone with an anxious glance. After dinner, when the party had mostly died down, Clarissa found him sipping a brandy in the corner of the living room. She approached, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Everything all right?" He gave a start, nearly spilling his drink. "Yes, just a text from one of my clients. Might have to leave for Dubai sooner than planned." Clarissa frowned slightly, but forced a smile. "So soon?" Before he could respond, Sir James strolled over. "Wonderful evening, Clarissa," he said warmly. "Your mother would be so proud of the work you're doing." "Thank you, Sir James. It means a lot to hear that from you," she replied with genuine warmth. Sir James then turned his attention to Sebastian. "I hear your business is expanding into renewable energy. Splendid. I spoke to Richard Branson recently. He mentioned something about you spearheading a major project in the Caribbean." Sebastian's face brightened with a polished smile. "Yes, it's in the pipeline. Still early stages. But we're exploring innovative solutions for sustainable investments." Sir James's bushy eyebrows arched with interest. "We must chat more about it soon. I might be able to connect you with some folks in Barbados." As Sir James wandered off to say his goodbyes, Clarissa saw the flicker of restlessness in Sebastian's eyes. Once the last guest left, Sebastian retreated to his study without a word. She followed him, concerned. There she found him hunched over his desk, scrolling through messages on his phone. The door was cracked open, just enough for her to glimpse the tension etched into his face. "Sebastian," she called softly, "is there something you're not telling me?" He looked up, startled, and locked his phone. "Clarissa, please. I'm under a lot of pressure. It's business." She nodded slowly. "If it's about the hedge fund, I can help. We can strategize together, look for solutions." "No," he interrupted curtly, "I don't want you involved in this." Hurt, she took a step back. The harshness in his tone made it clear he wasn't in the mood for further discussion. Fighting back tears, she left him to brood. Where had the days gone when they'd share every triumph and setback with each other? That night, Clarissa lay awake, gazing at the glittering Manhattan skyline. The only sound was the hum of traffic below and the occasional siren wailing in the distance. She wondered if wealth and power had claimed another victim, transforming the husband she loved into a stranger. She prayed that it was just a temporary setback, a phase that would pass once whatever business crisis he faced was resolved. She would soon learn that no amount of hope could stand against the tsunami of betrayal poised to break over her life. The truth was waiting to be uncovered, whether she was ready or not. The Farnsworths' philanthropic ties brought them to Berlin for a high-profile forum aimed at combating global inequality. Clarissa was one of the keynote speakers, and Sebastian accompanied her as he always did for these major public appearances. Their arrival was greeted by flashing cameras. They posed for photographs together, smiling in a display of unity that the press devoured. Inside the conference hall, Clarissa's speech drew a standing ovation. She spoke passionately about eliminating gender disparities in education, highlighting the work of her foundation and the global partnerships essential for meaningful change. She made casual references to coordinating with high net worth individuals like Bill Gates, emphasizing collaboration over competition. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Sebastian stood, clapping with the rest of the crowd, wearing that familiar, proud expression she'd fallen in love with years ago. During the lunch break, Clarissa was swarmed by admirers, fellow philanthropists, and journalists looking for a soundbite. Sebastian lingered at her side, whispering compliments, praising her eloquence. It was a rare moment in which they appeared to be the once indestructible duo. Their synergy was almost palpable. But as Clarissa worked the room, Sebastian's phone buzzed repeatedly. With each glance at the screen, his expression grew more anxious. Eventually, he leaned in and said, "I need to take care of something. I'll be back soon." She watched him slip away, guilt flickering across his face. For a moment, she wanted to follow, but the crowd demanded her attention. By the time she extricated herself, Sebastian was gone. Hours later, after the forum's panel discussions, Clarissa tried calling him. No answer. Confusion gnawed at her as she left voice messages. Her texts went unanswered. It wasn't until late evening that he returned, disheveled, apologizing profusely. "I ran into a major investor and got caught up in negotiations," he claimed. "Couldn't step away." Exhausted, Clarissa chose to believe him, though her instincts bristled. She hated the doubt that tinged their every interaction. The old Clarissa, so full of faith in her husband, was slipping away, replaced by a woman who was constantly bracing for heartbreak. The next day at the forum, Clarissa participated in a strategic roundtable with influential philanthropists. One participant, Baroness Elizabeth Rothstein, inquired after Sebastian's whereabouts. "We were supposed to chat about new joint ventures, but he hasn't shown up," she said. Clarissa felt a sinking dread in her stomach. She mustered a polite smile and promised to pass along a message to him. But when the session ended and Clarissa checked her phone, there was no update from Sebastian. She wandered through the convention center's expansive corridors, scanning every face for her husband. She caught sight of a tall figure slipping out a side exit, phone pressed to his ear. She recognized the slope of his shoulders. Sebastian. Quickening her pace, Clarissa made her way through the exit, only to find him in heated conversation, his tone urgent and hushed. When Sebastian noticed her, he abruptly ended the call. "Clarissa," he said, startled. "I was just finishing up a phone meeting." "Who was that?" she asked softly, heart pounding. "A client." "I can't divulge details," he said curtly, slipping his phone into his pocket. Clarissa searched his eyes. There was a tension there, a guardedness he'd never displayed before. For a moment, she thought she smelled a faint trace of a perfume that was definitely not hers. She almost mentioned it, but stopped. If she accused him outright without proof, it would create an even bigger rift. Instead, she simply nodded, feigning acceptance. That evening, they attended the closing banquet together. Clarissa maintained appearances, laughing and clinking glasses with other attendees. Sebastian performed his role impeccably, lauding her achievements with affectionate remarks. On the surface, it was a glamorous display of a supportive marriage, the golden Farnsworth couple. But beneath the sparkle of crystal chandeliers and the swirl of evening gowns, Clarissa felt a tremor in the foundation of their lives. She could sense that the entire edifice was on the brink of collapse, ready to shatter under the weight of secrets and lies. Returning to London, Clarissa confronted the swirling doubts that had kept her awake at night. Amelia's counsel echoed in her mind: if you suspect something, find the truth even if it hurts. Taking the advice to heart, Clarissa decided to hire a private investigator, knowing full well she was crossing a line she'd never imagined crossing. Trust in a marriage was paramount, but at this point, ignorance was simply prolonging her agony. Through a discreet referral, she contacted Robert Hansen, a veteran investigator who had built a reputation on solving the unsolvable. He was a tall, wiry man with piercing green eyes that suggested he'd seen it all. Their first meeting took place in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes. Clarissa arrived in a simple coat and sunglasses, nervously checking her surroundings before stepping inside. Hansen listened patiently as she described her suspicions, Sebastian's odd behavior, the unexplained absences, the credit card statements from exclusive restaurants. She handed him a folder filled with her notes, itemized logs of instances that had seemed suspicious. Hansen leafed through them, scribbling occasional remarks in a small notebook. "When did you start noticing changes?" he asked, his voice calm, deliberate. "About 6 months ago," Clarissa admitted. "He began traveling more. At first, I didn't question it. He's a busy man. But lately it's felt like he's almost living a double life." Hansen nodded thoughtfully. "I'll need access to his travel itineraries, phone logs if possible, any social media accounts. Discretion is paramount. If there's something there, I'll find it." Clarissa felt a pang of guilt. She worried she was betraying Sebastian by resorting to these measures. But she reassured herself that if he was indeed innocent, Hansen would confirm it. Then she could lay her doubts to rest and focus on repairing their marriage. If, however, her worst fears proved true, she needed to know. Within a few days, Hansen's investigation was underway. Clarissa felt a swirl of emotions, relief at taking proactive steps, and a deepening dread that the answers might ruin her life. She found it increasingly difficult to face Sebastian each morning, forcing a smile when he kissed her goodbye, unsure if he was returning to the office or to another woman's arms. Late one evening, Hansen sent Clarissa a text. "We need to meet." Her stomach clenched. She arranged for another discreet rendezvous, this time at a dimly lit bar in Soho. She arrived early, sipping water while anxiously drumming her fingers on the table. Hansen slipped in quietly and took a seat across from her. He looked grave. "I have preliminary findings," he began. "Your husband has been in frequent contact with a woman named Aria Levesque. They've met multiple times at high-end hotels, Claridge's in London, the Hôtel de Crillon in Paris, and recently in Berlin." Clarissa's world blurred. She felt the weight of the name, Aria, pressing against her chest. She couldn't speak. Hansen continued gently, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Farnsworth, but from what I've gathered, it seems like an ongoing affair. There are photographs as well, should you need them." Her mind spun, a vortex of betrayal and heartbreak. At that moment, Clarissa wished she could unlearn everything Hansen had just told her. But the seeds of doubt had sprouted into poisonous truth. She had the answer she both craved and dreaded. Pushing back tears, she thanked Hansen and took his folder of evidence, scarcely noticing that she was leaving the bar without even touching her drink. Outside, the London night seemed colder than usual, the city lights strangely distant. Her instincts had been right all along, but the knowledge brought no comfort, only heartbreak, and the grim realization that her fairy tale marriage might be irrevocably doomed. Sebastian Farnsworth's life was spiraling out of control. Even as he juggled multi-million-dollar deals behind the polished facade, he felt a creeping sense of dread. Lies were piling on top of lies. Each day, Aria demanded more of his time, and he couldn't resist her allure. Yet he also couldn't bear the thought of losing Clarissa, the woman whose integrity and grace had defined his best self. Sometimes, in the stillness of his office late at night, he wondered how he had let things go this far. He recalled the early days with Clarissa, how her unwavering kindness and love for humanity had drawn him like a moth to flame. He missed the simplicity of their shared dreams, traveling the world to champion good causes, forging partnerships that brought hope to marginalized communities. But as his hedge fund grew, so did his appetite for success. He found himself drawn to the high-stakes environment of wealth and power, a web that Aria exploited with remarkable skill. Aria was never just a fling. She was a living testament to the power of seduction. She gave Sebastian a sense of rebellion against the perfect image he felt compelled to maintain. With her, he could express frustrations that he dared not reveal to Clarissa. He convinced himself that the affair was an emotional release, something that would never truly threaten his marriage. But as the months passed, the lines blurred. He was now lying to both women, helplessly ensnared in a labyrinth of secrets. There were moments he hated himself, like when Aria would text him an ultimatum and he'd drop everything to appease her. Or when Clarissa gave him a trusting smile and he responded with a half-truth about a business trip. He told himself he was protecting Clarissa from heartbreak, yet in reality, he was simply prolonging the inevitable. On a rare night when he found himself alone, Sebastian stood by the window of his London office, gazing at the city skyline. The glass reflected back a man he scarcely recognized. He raked a hand through his hair, heart thudding with unease. Financially, he was at the top of his game. His name was recognized in boardrooms worldwide. Yet, on a personal level, he was bankrupt, morally compromised by deception. He recalled an incident from his childhood. He had once lied to his grandmother, his beloved mentor, about breaking her antique vase. The guilt had consumed him until he finally confessed. She forgave him instantly, but delivered a warning he never forgot. A lie can weigh more than any burden you'll ever carry. He had scoffed at the time, but now that weight felt like an anchor dragging him into a bottomless sea. He texted Aria, making excuses as to why he couldn't see her that week. Then he sat down and began drafting an email to Clarissa. He typed, deleted, and typed again, trying to put into words the tangle in his heart. But how could he confess to her via email? How could he admit that the man she had placed on a pedestal was deeply flawed? Every attempt ended in frustration. He closed his laptop, burying his face in his hands. As midnight approached, he made a silent resolution. Once the next major deal closed, he would extricate himself from the affair and mend the rift in his marriage. One last big score, he told himself. Then I'll make things right. But little did he realize that secrets have a life of their own, and the illusions he was weaving were about to come crashing down far sooner than he expected. Clarissa sat alone in her bedroom, the folder of evidence from Robert Hansen spread out on the bed. Photographs of Sebastian and Aria holding hands, kissing, entering hotels together. Each image was more damning than the last. Her eyes stung with tears, but she forced herself to look, to fully absorb the reality of her shattered marriage. She placed a trembling hand over her mouth, trying to stifle a sob. The images told a story of betrayal that stretched from London to Paris to Berlin. Everything Clarissa had feared was true, but what hurt the most was the depth of Sebastian's duplicity. He had lied repeatedly, while gazing into her eyes with apparent sincerity. She tried to make sense of it. How could the man who championed ethical investments, who donated millions to charity, who publicly professed devotion to her, be the same man sneaking off with another woman in luxury hotels? Part of her wanted to believe there was a mistake, but the evidence was incontrovertible. Amelia arrived shortly afterward, summoned by a frantic phone call. She found Clarissa surrounded by the scattered photos and written reports. Without a word, Amelia rushed to her friend's side, enveloping her in a comforting embrace. Clarissa collapsed into sobs, her tears soaking Amelia's blouse. Between sobs, Clarissa managed to speak. How could he do this? Why would he betray everything we built together? Amelia's features hardened with protective anger. I don't know, but you don't deserve this. We'll figure out the next steps, okay? Clarissa nodded, wiping her eyes. I need to see him. I need him to tell me to my face. In that moment, she knew this confrontation could change her life forever, but she couldn't live under illusions any longer. She waited for Sebastian to return home that evening, adrenaline fueling her resolve. He walked in casually, loosening his tie, his expression lighting up at the sight of her. Hey, I was thinking maybe we could. His voice trailed off as he noticed the pictures fanned out on the coffee table. His face went ashen. Clarissa, let me explain, he began, his voice shaky. She stood, arms folded, her face etched with pain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me? That while I poured my heart into our foundation, You were sneaking around with her. Her voice trembled, but she refused to crumble. Sebastian's eyes flickered with shame. It was a mistake, he said, raking a hand through his hair. It started out of, I don't know. I was confused. I was under pressure. It just happened. It just happened. Clarissa echoed bitterly. We promised each other honesty. We built a life founded on trust. How could you do this? He took a step closer, guilt weighing on him. I never meant to hurt you, Clarissa. I swear I love you. She glanced away, tears sliding down her cheeks. You can't claim to love me and do this. That's not how love works. The room seemed to close in around them, thick with heartbreak. Sebastian opened his mouth to plead further, but Clarissa raised a trembling hand. I need time, she said. Don't sleep here tonight. I can't look at you without seeing those pictures. He nodded, tears forming in his own eyes. I understand. I'm sorry. The gravity of his betrayal hung in the air like a sentence. He gathered some belongings and left in silence. Once the door shut, Clarissa collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing. There was no immediate comfort, no easy salve for her wound. This was the moment she had dreaded, but she also felt a strange sense of relief. The lie was no longer crouching in the shadows. The truth was out, and though it tore her heart, it was hers to confront. In the aftermath, Clarissa went into a kind of emotional lockdown. She avoided social events, leaving Amelia and her board members to helm any urgent foundation business. She couldn't bear the inevitable questions about Sebastian's absence. Instead, she spent long hours in bed or pacing through the silent rooms of their London residence, haunted by memories of happier times. Aria Levesque, meanwhile, found herself at a crossroads. Sebastian had stopped responding to her texts. Alarmed by his sudden distance, she toyed with the idea of exposing the affair to force his hand, but she wasn't entirely sure how Clarissa would react. Aria thrived on control. Unpredictability was her enemy. For the first time, she realized she might lose the power she had held over Sebastian, the power that ensured he showered her with gifts and attention. She decided to reach out through one last bold move, a call placed directly to Clarissa Farnsworth. Clarissa almost dropped her phone when she recognized the name on the caller ID. On instinct, she rejected the call, her heart pounding in her chest. But when Aria texted her, claiming she wanted to discuss Sebastian's future, Clarissa felt an odd compulsion to face the other woman. They agreed to meet at a discreet cafe in Chelsea the following afternoon. Sitting across a small round table from Aria, Clarissa couldn't help but notice the woman's poise. Aria was undeniably beautiful, with sharp cheekbones, immaculate makeup, and an aura of self-assurance. Her piercing brown eyes met Clarissa's with neither shame nor apology. I wanted to see you, Aria began smoothly, to clarify that Sebastian doesn't owe me anything. Whatever happens next is up to him and you. Clarissa's voice quivered with anger. This isn't just about transactions, Miss Levesque. You've been sleeping with my husband. I'm not sure you grasp the devastation you've caused. Aria sipped her tea calmly. I understand your pain, but don't act like I manipulated him into something he didn't want. Sebastian was a willing participant. Clarissa's expression hardened. Do you think I care who initiated it? You both betrayed me. Aria nodded, unflinching. I suppose you want to know what kind of relationship we had. The answer, deeper than mere lust. He confided in me about his insecurities, about feeling overshadowed. How dare you? Clarissa interjected, tears threatening to spill. You have no right to talk about my husband's feelings as if you understand him better than I do. Aria's eyes flashed. Maybe I do. Did you ever see Sebastian's frustration with being the second star in your philanthropic sky? You're always the saint, the perfect wife. He was suffocating. Clarissa stood abruptly, hands trembling. "This conversation is over. Don't ever contact me again." She turned and walked away, fury mingling with heartbreak. Aria's words echoed in her mind. He was suffocating. Part of Clarissa feared there was a kernel of truth in it. Had she somehow neglected Sebastian's emotional needs? Reeling from the encounter, Clarissa called Amelia, who arrived at the cafe moments later. Clarissa broke down, recounting every detail. Amelia listened, trying to comfort her friend. "Don't let her poison your thoughts," Amelia said firmly. "Sebastian made his own choices." Clarissa nodded, but deep inside, she felt battered by conflicting emotions. Yes, Sebastian had betrayed her, but was there a deeper fissure in their marriage that she'd overlooked? She returned home utterly drained, longing for the sanctuary of simpler times. Yet she knew she was changed forever. No matter how events unfolded, she could never again be the wide-eyed optimist who believed in fairy tale endings. Word of the Farnsworth marital crisis leaked into elite circles, whispering rumors that spread with ruthless efficiency. Society pages speculated about Sebastian's absence at Clarissa's side, while paparazzi snapped pictures of Clarissa appearing visibly distraught. On social media, armchair commentators tried to guess the cause, some attributing it to business disputes, others claiming it was a classic tale of rich husband gets bored. Desperate to contain the damage, Sebastian reached out to Clarissa, begging for a meeting. At first, she refused. But after days of his persistent calls and tearful voicemails, she agreed to see him at Amelia's office, a neutral ground that offered some emotional distance. Dressed simply in black trousers and a cream-colored blouse, Clarissa took a seat across the table from Sebastian. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, hair disheveled. Amelia sat quietly to the side, ready to intervene if things escalated. Sebastian began with a heartfelt apology. "I know I've hurt you in the worst possible way. I can't even find the words to express my regret." Clarissa folded her hands on the table, maintaining composure. "Why, Sebastian, how could you do it? Was our life not enough for you?" He swallowed hard, tears glistening. "I was selfish, insecure. You were shining so brightly, and I felt overshadowed. Aria offered an escape, a place where I was the center. It was a terrible decision, and I know I don't deserve forgiveness." Clarissa shook her head, her voice tremulous. "You should have talked to me. I would have listened, tried to understand. But now, you've torn us apart." They lapsed into a tense silence, broken only by Sebastian's choked sob. "I ended it with Aria. She means nothing to me compared to you. I want to fix this, Clarissa. I'll do whatever it takes." Amelia interjected calmly. "Clarissa needs to decide what's best for her. You should respect that." Over the next hour, the two navigated the emotional wreckage. Sebastian begged for another chance, promising therapy, time away from business, anything to rebuild trust. Clarissa, however, was hesitant. The betrayal was fresh, her wounds still bleeding. She didn't know if therapy or grand gestures could restore the innocence of their bond. "I need space," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Time to think, to decide if I can ever trust you again. And in that time, I don't want you pushing me. Do you understand?" Sebastian nodded, tears spilling onto his cheeks. "I understand. I'm so sorry." Leaving Amelia's office, Clarissa felt more exhausted than ever. Part of her ached to take Sebastian back. Her heart still yearned for the man she loved. Yet she also felt anger, a sense of betrayal so profound it threatened to overshadow every happy memory they'd shared. Back at her penthouse, Clarissa found herself confronted by more than just her marriage problems. The press had gotten wind of something big, rumored financial irregularities in Sebastian's hedge fund. She turned on the TV to see a news anchor discussing possible investigations into Farnsworth Capital for insider trading. Stunned, Clarissa realized that Sebastian's problems ran deeper than infidelity. Now, more than just her personal life was at stake, the philanthropic empire they built together, their reputations, everything was on a precarious edge. As the reality sank in, Clarissa understood she had decisions to make that would define not just her future, but the legacy of the Evelyn Wellington Foundation as well. Sebastian's betrayal was painful enough, but if he was also implicated in something illegal, the fallout could be catastrophic for their shared causes. She stared at the screen, heart pounding, wondering if it was all crumbling before her eyes. In the weeks that followed, Clarissa grappled with a maelstrom of emotions and events. The allegations against Farnsworth Capital escalated, bringing unwelcome media scrutiny. Suddenly, every aspect of Sebastian's life was under the microscope. Journalists dug into his financial records, searching for evidence of wrongdoing. Investors grew skittish, leading to massive withdrawals that shook the hedge fund's stability. Sebastian denied any illegal activity. He insisted that while he had taken some risky bets, everything was above board. Still, Clarissa knew better than most how truth could be bent, especially in the high-stakes world of finance. She kept her distance, focusing on the foundation and damage control. The last thing she wanted was for their philanthropic work to be tainted by scandal. Amid the chaos, Aria Levesque made one final move. She scheduled a press conference to clear the air. People expected a salacious tell all about her affair with Sebastian, but instead, Aria shocked everyone by focusing on Farnsworth Capital's questionable deals. She presented documents suggesting insider knowledge, hinting that Sebastian might have leveraged personal relationships with politicians and corporations to gain an unfair advantage. The press devoured the scandal, painting Sebastian as a cunning manipulator who cheated not just on his wife, but on the very financial systems he claimed to serve ethically. Clarissa watched the press conference in disbelief, feeling a surge of conflicting emotions: betrayal, pity, resentment, and a strange sense of vindication that Aria's manipulative ways were finally exposed. Panicked calls flooded Clarissa's phone from donors and board members demanding to know if the foundation was involved. Clarissa was forced to hold an emergency board meeting. With a heavy heart, she assured them that the foundation's finances were separate and clean. Though it stung, she also recommended distancing the foundation's public image from Sebastian until investigations concluded. Finally, battered by shame and personal turmoil, Sebastian reached out one last time, begging Clarissa to meet him. This time she agreed, though she insisted the meeting take place in her father's estate in the countryside, a place removed from paparazzi lenses and corporate boardrooms. She arrived early, wandering the estate's manicured gardens, recalling a time when she believed love conquered all. Sebastian appeared at noon, looking haggard and wearing clothes that were wrinkled from too many nights spent outside his home. They strolled through the gardens in silence until they reached a quiet bench under an ancient oak tree. Clarissa took a seat, steeling her resolve to say what needed to be said. He collapsed onto the bench beside her. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I've lost everything: my reputation, my investors, you." Clarissa closed her eyes briefly, fighting back tears. "I can't believe I'm asking this, but was anything real, Sebastian? Were we real?" His voice trembled. "Yes, with you it was always real. I let my ambitions and insecurities ruin us. I wish I could turn back time." She studied him, noting the regret etched into his features. Part of her wanted to comfort him, but she remembered the betrayal and the lies. "What you did, I can't just forget it. It wasn't one mistake, it was months, maybe years of lying." Sebastian nodded, silent tears escaping down his cheeks. "I'll sign whatever you want. If you want a divorce, I won't fight it." Clarissa's chest tightened at the finality of that word, divorce. Once, they had dreamed of growing old together, traveling the world hand in hand. Now they were discussing a legal end to those vows. "I don't know," she said hoarsely. "I need time. I need to heal. For now, we have to protect the foundation, our staff, the people we serve. I can't afford to let your personal crisis destroy everything we built." He lowered his gaze. "I understand." They sat there, enveloped in the hush of the countryside, the once happy couple now separated by an impenetrable wall of hurt. Eventually, Sebastian rose, gave her a final lingering look, and walked away. Clarissa remained on the bench, staring at the distant horizon, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She realized that even with all the wealth, influence, and good intentions in the world, they were not immune to human frailties, temptation, insecurity, and the consequences of betrayal. In that moment, she felt a glimmer of hope that she could rebuild her life. It might not be the fairy tale she once envisioned, but perhaps it could be something stronger, a life forged from truth rather than illusions. For now, the future was uncertain, but at least she stood on the solid ground of reality. There were no more lies to hide behind, only the courage to face whatever came next. Betrayal, heartbreak, and scandal nearly tore Clarissa's world apart, but they also forced her to confront painful truths and reclaim her life. While Sebastian grapples with the wreckage of his downfall, Clarissa emerges as a resilient survivor, committed to her philanthropic vision, no longer overshadowed by illusions of a perfect marriage. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey.
Nicholas Harrington was the kind of man everyone admired, handsome, impeccably dressed, and so wealthy he seemed untouchable. Yet behind the polished smile and designer suits lay a storm of secrets. Whispers of a hidden mistress, hushed payments, and a lavish private jet only fueled suspicions. Meanwhile, his pregnant wife, Vivian, presented the perfect picture of elegance, but her gentle demeanor hid a fierce determination. When rumors morphed into revelations and heartbreak morphed into fury, Nicholas found himself caught between two formidable women. One held his heart with her forbidden allure. The other held his future in her hands, and she wouldn't hesitate to destroy him. Nicholas Harrington was the name on everyone's lips in Manhattan's high society. He'd been splashed across the pages of Forbes for amassing an empire of tech startups merged under his flagship company, Harrington Innovations. Stocks soared whenever he smiled at the camera, and interviews with him became the stuff of legend. Indeed, Nicholas possessed an air of unflappable confidence, arguably his greatest asset. Yet behind the glitz, he nursed a sense of emptiness he seldom acknowledged. Only 3 years ago, he had swept Vivian Chambers, now Vivian Harrington, off her feet. They wed at St. Patrick's Cathedral, surrounded by luminaries like Warren Buffett and Anna Wintour. The tabloids called it the wedding of the year, and it looked from the outside like a fairy tale. But as Nicholas stood in his corner office overlooking Central Park on a sultry June afternoon, he couldn't help feeling an undercurrent of panic. Every corner he turned, there seemed to be a fresh rumor, a new swirl of gossip that threatened to dislodge him from his throne. He had used his wealth to hush many controversies, paying hush money to employees or settling disputes with out-of-court deals. But this was different. Eliana Stone was the name on his mind. She was a rising socialite, best known for being seen on the arms of powerful men from time to time. Years younger than Nicholas, she was seductive, confident, and unrelentingly ambitious. In a world where everyone was chasing the next best connection, Eliana cultivated powerful alliances like collecting jewelry, shiny precious and carefully curated. He recalled the night they met under the shimmering chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel. He was hosting a fundraising gala in collaboration with the Real Impact Foundation, one that Michael Bloomberg and even Leonardo DiCaprio had RSVP'd to. Eliana arrived in a midnight blue gown, turning heads as though an invisible spotlight illuminated her every step. When she approached Nicholas with a fluted champagne glass and a half smile, the spark of desire caught him off guard. Flattery ensued, laughter flowed. By the end of the evening, she had charmed him into exchanging private phone numbers, something he had never done so openly before. That first encounter led to clandestine lunches at Michelin-starred restaurants and stolen nights in penthouse suites. All of it, Nicholas believed, was under meticulous secrecy. He had relied on his power and money to safeguard his indiscretions, ensuring that not a whisper reached Vivian's ears. Except now rumors about a mystery woman had leaked into the tabloids. His nerve endings were on fire. He couldn't let it spiral into scandal. Little did he know the scandal would soon become the least of his worries. The private jet was only the beginning. And as far as Vivian was concerned, her husband's name might soon be etched in the court dockets of the New York Supreme Court. Vivian Harrington was as poised as she was intelligent. A Harvard graduate who once studied under the tutelage of Dr. Elizabeth Warren. Vivian had her own promising career in international law before dedicating herself to philanthropic work. She was the woman who believed in justice and fairness, raising millions for global women's education initiatives through her foundation. Yet inside the walls of her Park Avenue penthouse, she increasingly felt like a naive girl in a dangerous adult world. That morning, Vivian quietly sipped on her specially blended herbal tea, recommended by her prenatal physician, Dr. Candace Lynn, at Mount Sinai. Yes, she was pregnant 3 months along. A child was all she had dreamed of. For the last year, an addition to the home she and Nicholas were supposed to build together. Instead, she sensed him drifting day by day. She tried not to let insecurities get the better of her. Nicholas was a busy man, an empire builder with thousands of employees relying on him. She told herself that his stress was natural. But when Vivian discovered a suspicious envelope tucked into his desk, her illusions began to crack. Inside was an invoice from a private aviation company referencing a Gulfstream G650 acquisition. The aircraft cost a staggering sum, tens of millions of dollars, and the name on the delivery address was not Harrington Innovations, nor Nicholas Harrington. It read, Eliana Stone. At first, Vivian's mind refused to process the implications. A private jet in another woman's name. Perhaps it was a business arrangement or a philanthropic gesture for a charitable venture. She fought to rationalize it. But the pit in her stomach deepened when she remembered her girlfriends whispering at a recent luncheon about a high-profile mistress rumored to be kept by a certain Manhattan billionaire. Nicholas had brushed off those rumors with a confident laugh, insisting they were about some fool with more money than sense. Over the next several days, her morning sickness became more severe, compounded by the mental anguish swirling within her. Confusion threatened to knock her off balance. She remembered Nicholas once promising her the world I will go to any length to keep you happy, he had said on their honeymoon in Santorini. Vivian reached out for help in the only way she trusted. She called her best friend and confidant, Dr. Elise Parker, a renowned psychologist. Elise provided a listening ear, but warned her to gather more information before confronting Nicholas. After all, if he was truly funneling money into a mistress, there might be deeper layers at play. Vivian tried to calm herself, but that single invoice refused to disappear from her thoughts. She spent nights thinking of the unborn child within her, a child who deserved a stable family, a healthy father, and a mother who wasn't paralyzed by betrayal. As the seeds of suspicion took root, Her resolve hardened. She would not be deceived. Vivian Harrington was about to embark on a path that would shake her marriage to its core. Eliana Stone didn't see herself as a mistress, let alone a kept woman. To her, that term was archaic, reserved for women lacking agency. Eliana considered herself a strategist. A Denver native, she had relocated to New York in her early 20s, chasing a career in fashion design. Yet she quickly discovered that her real talent lay in navigating social circles. She was bright, persuasive, and adept at reading a room. Once she found her way into Manhattan's elite gatherings, she leveraged her beauty and wit to forge relationships with the city's movers and shakers. On one particularly humid evening, Eliana stepped out of a black Escalade in front of a private hangar at Teterboro Airport. The manager of the facility, Richard Combs, an old friend she had once dated, casually greeted her with a wary smile. He handed her a set of documents referencing the brand-new Gulfstream G650 that unbelievably Nicholas Harrington had purchased in her name. Eliana was no stranger to lavish gifts. She had once been flown to Dubai by a European royal who wanted nothing more than her presence on his yacht. She had a closet full of designer items bestowed by admirers, but this private jet was on another level. Her heart hammered as she read the certificate of ownership. Nicholas had confided in her that he wanted to ensure her comfort for traveling to philanthropic events and business summits abroad. But Eliana wasn't naive. She knew this was more than a thoughtful gesture. It was Nicholas's attempt to keep her tethered to him away from prying eyes of the city. The jet was both a bribe and a fortress guaranteeing her silence and loyalty. Yet part of Eliana recoiled. She had never planned to become so intricately tied to any single man, especially not one with a pregnant wife. The tabloids had begun sniffing around, and she feared the blowback that might fall on her if she found herself in the crosshairs of Vivian Harrington's circle. Vivian was formidable. Harvard-educated philanthropic, loved by Manhattan's elite. One misstep, Eliana reasoned, and it could be game over for her carefully curated image. Eliana contemplated her next steps. If Nicholas was that desperate to hide her from the public eye, was there something bigger behind the scenes? She had heard rumors about SEC investigations into a few of his acquisitions. Had she tied her fate to a man with looming legal troubles? She texted Nicholas a simple message: "We need to talk." Eliana was determined to control the narrative, even if it meant confronting him about the real reasons behind this extravagant gift. Because if there was one thing she had learned in New York, it was that knowledge equaled power, and she would not hesitate to use that power, no matter whose heart got broken in the process. Nicholas arrived home late, nerves fraying like the edges of a tattered flag. The doorman gave him a polite nod, but Nicholas barely registered it as he stepped into the lavish marble lobby of his Park Avenue building. It was nearly midnight, and he expected Vivian to be asleep. What he didn't expect was to find her waiting in the living room. Lights dimmed silhouette, rigid against the city lights, beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Vivian. He tried for a gentle tone, but his voice trembled. There was a sense of dread prickling the air. She slowly turned, revealing tear-streaked cheeks. She had a file in her hands, a sheaf of papers. Nicholas recognized them almost immediately. They were documents from the private aviation deal. His pulse accelerated. "Is there something you want to tell me?" "Nicholas." Her voice was steady, but the heartbreak in her eyes was impossible to miss. He inhaled sharply, trying to form a coherent response. "Vivian, it's not what you think. Then what is it?" Because it looks like you purchased a multi-million-dollar jet for a woman named Eliana Stone. Nicholas raked a hand through his hair, searching for a plausible explanation. But the well of excuses ran dry. He tried to spin a tale about business alliances and investor perks, but every word felt hollow the moment it left his lips. Vivian let him speak, her gaze never wavering. She cut in. "Do you think I'm naive? I know who she is, Nicholas. The tabloids are filled with her name these days." She laid a hand protectively over her stomach. "Is this the man you want to be when our child is born?" His shame curdled into something else. Defensiveness, perhaps. "I never asked for any of this," he muttered, voice tight. "It just happened." Vivian's composure shattered. "Things don't just happen, Nicholas. You've built an empire out of your ability to control events, so don't tell me you suddenly lost control." She waved the documents in his face. "We're talking about tens of millions of dollars. Our child's future. Our marriage." She turned away as though she couldn't bear to look at him any longer. "You need to decide, Nicholas. Decide what you want before I walk out of here." Staggered by the ultimatum, Nicholas tried to approach her, arms outstretched. She recoiled. "Don't," she warned. "Just don't." As he watched the woman he once adored disappear behind the bedroom door, Nicholas realized that his well-maintained double life was crashing into pieces. In that moment, it dawned on him what he feared most was not losing money or reputation. It was losing Vivian and the life they had planned for their unborn child. While Nicholas scrambled to pacify Vivian and keep Eliana in check, the corporate underbelly of Harrington Innovations was churning. A federal probe long rumored among financial circles was heating up. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, had launched a quiet investigation into possible insider trading and irregularities in the company's recent mergers. At first, it was a mere whisper, circulating among high-powered attorneys at Cravath, Swaine & Moore, one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms. But soon, Nicholas's top legal advisor, Henry Caldwell, confirmed that the whispers were real. Nicholas had always regarded Henry as a loyal strategist, a bulldog in court who could fend off anything. But even Henry seemed uneasy at the magnitude of the inquiries. Nicholas sat in his corner office gazing out at the skyline as Henry laid down the facts. They're sniffing around the TechCore acquisition from last year, and the deal with Agnelli Biotech. They claim a tip-off about false financial disclosures. Nicholas felt a pang of paranoia. Could these investigations connect to the hush money he'd funneled to secure Eliana's silence, or the extravagant private jet purchase that was linked on paper to Stone Enterprises, one of her front companies? He had always believed that the pillars of his empire were unshakable, built on legitimate business moves. Yet, in an era of eagle-eyed regulators, no slip went unnoticed. And with the tabloids abuzz over his alleged affair, he worried that a scandal might offer investigators the perfect opening to dig deeper. The SEC was known to exploit personal controversies to pressure executives into cooperation or confessions. Henry Caldwell exhaled and tossed a folder on Nicholas's desk. "We need to distance any questionable transactions from your personal finances. Make sure the board has your back, or we risk a revolt once this becomes public." The notion of a board revolt rattled Nicholas. He had cultivated an image of supreme leadership at Harrington Innovations. But if the directors began to fear for their own reputations, loyalty could vanish. In a twist of timing, Eliana chose that evening to call him in a frantic state. She had been summoned for questioning by the SEC to clarify her involvement in Stone Enterprises. Eliana sounded panicked. "Nicholas, they're asking about the plane. They want to know if Stone Enterprises has any stake in Harrington Innovations. I'm not going down for this." Nicholas clenched his jaw. "Keep calm. I'll handle it," he said, though he had no immediate plan. Beneath the shimmering surface of his life, the ground was quaking. Between a pregnant wife who threatened to leave him a mistress who could crumble under investigative pressure and a looming federal probe, Nicholas sensed the perfect storm gathering strength. If he didn't move swiftly, everything he'd built and everyone he cared about might be swept away. Vivian noticed a distinct shift in the atmosphere at charity luncheons and social gatherings. Friends who once flocked to her side now had a certain guardedness in their eyes. She couldn't decide if it was pity judgment or both. As rumors spread about Nicholas's affair, sympathy for the pregnant wife was overshadowed by the thrill of gossip. Even her long-time confidant, Serena Van Doren, heiress to a real estate fortune, seemed more interested in gleaning scandalous details than offering emotional support. But not everyone turned away. An unexpected ally emerged in the form of Tristan Zhao, a brilliant defense attorney from Cravath, Swain and Moore, who happened to be a distant cousin of Vivian's. When he caught wind of the SEC's investigation and the swirling allegations against Nicholas, Tristan reached out privately. "Vivian, I'm here if you need help. Nicholas might be my firm's client, but your family." Vivian was taken aback. She appreciated the gesture, but also recognized the delicate position Tristan was in. Representing Harrington Innovations meant he had to safeguard Nicholas's interests. Yet Tristan made it clear, "My loyalty is to truth and justice. If you're in legal jeopardy, or if you suspect wrongdoing that affects you and your child, I'll point you to the right resources." Meanwhile, Eliana found herself cornered by an unexpected visitor, Frederick Klein, a tabloid journalist known for his cutthroat tactics. He showed up at her penthouse suite at the Mandarin Oriental, brandishing a notepad and a cunning smile. "Miss Stone, I have reason to believe you're at the center of the biggest scandal in Manhattan. Care to comment?" Her first instinct was to slam the door. But Frederick was persistent, offering a tantalizing deal. If she gave him an exclusive, he'd publish a sympathetic portrayal of her. "We can paint you as the young entrepreneur caught in Nicholas Harrington's web," he offered slyly. Eliana felt the sting of humiliation. She had been too confident, believing she could handle the entanglement. But Nicholas had drawn her into legal complications that threatened her business reputation. Part of her wanted to expose his secrets, to let the world see him for who he truly was. Another part feared losing the lavish lifestyle he had provided, especially the prized private jet. In a smoky midtown bar, Henry Caldwell met with board members from Harrington Innovations, hoping to shore up support for Nicholas. But he found dissent instead. They worried about stock prices plummeting if the CEO was entangled in an affair and an SEC investigation simultaneously. Some murmured about forcing a temporary leave of absence. Others, more calculating, considered if they should cut ties entirely for the sake of the company's public image. Little by little, Nicholas's fortress of influence was being assailed from every angle. Allies were scarce, enemies multiplying. And though he tried to manage each crisis, he was finding it impossible to keep all the plates spinning. Everyone had a stake in the game, and the stakes were rising by the hour. As summer draped New York in a cloak of heat, the chill of tension inside the Harrington penthouse grew increasingly palpable. Vivian's pregnancy advanced her belly, gently rounding a testament to a future she once believed would be bright. Now it served as a constant reminder that life moved forward no matter the turmoil. One evening, Vivian heard the door creak open. Nicholas returned, looking more haggard than she'd ever seen him. He loosened his tie and poured himself a tumbler of scotch, a habit he'd resumed after years of sobriety from his college days at Stanford. She watched silently from across the living room, waiting for him to speak. The conversation that followed was as raw as the city's summer air. Nicholas confessed, or at least tried to. He admitted that yes, he had been involved with Eliana, but he insisted it was just a distraction that spiraled out of control. He claimed he ended it weeks ago, but the private jet had already been purchased, an irrevocable transaction. Vivian glared at him. You think that's what this is about? A fling? A toy you bought her? What about the possibility of legal consequences, Nicholas? Don't you see how vulnerable this makes us? He grimaced, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I never intended for any of this. The SEC is digging into my deals and Eliana's name came up. Now she's threatening to speak to reporters. He paused, voice wavering. I'm terrified, Vivian, of losing you, losing the company, losing everything. Vivian felt a pang of sadness for the man she once admired, but anger roiled within her too. She approached him, eyes fierce. I've decided to retain my own attorney, Nicholas. If this escalates, I won't be blindsided. Tristan Zhao has offered to guide me to a top family law specialist. Nicholas's face contorted. You'd do that to me. Take legal action while I'm already under investigation. Don't you dare act like the victim here. Vivian shot back, her voice quiet but resolute. I'm pregnant with our child. If you jeopardize everything with your recklessness, I need to ensure we're protected. I won't stand by, powerless. A heavy silence descended. Finally, Nicholas set his glass down with a trembling hand. What do you want from me? Vivian's eyes brimmed with tears. I want the truth. I want you to own up to your actions, publicly, if necessary. And if that means stepping down from Harrington Innovations to preserve the company you built, then so be it. She took a slow breath, hand resting gently on her belly. Decide, Nicholas. Decide whether you're going to run from this or face it. But know that if you choose deceit again, I will protect myself and our child, no matter the cost. In that moment, Nicholas realized that mere apologies would no longer suffice. The ultimatum was clear: salvage his integrity, or lose not just his wife and child, but also his very freedom. When the story about Nicholas Harrington's alleged affair and the mysterious private jet finally hit the tabloids, it broke like a thunderclap across social media. Frederick Klein's publication headlined it as "Billionaire Lover's Air Affair. Harrington's Jet for His Secret Mistress." The accompanying photos of Eliana Stone stepping out of the sleek Gulfstream G650 were enough to set tongues wagging across the country. Nicholas's phone erupted with calls from board members, investors, and old friends demanding explanations. The PR department at Harrington Innovations scrambled to craft a statement. Vivian braced herself for the paparazzi who staked out the building lobby in hopes of snapping pictures of the devastated wife. Even Serena Van Doren called equal parts sympathetic and fascinated by the unfolding chaos. Amid the storm, Nicholas retreated to his home office, pacing like a caged animal. Eliana's betrayal stung. She had effectively confirmed the existence of the jet, if not the entire affair. He had tried to soothe her panic about the SEC, but in doing so he'd only made her more aware of how precarious his position was. With her new leverage, Eliana seemed ready to play all her cards. Desperate to salvage what remained, Nicholas arranged a secret meeting with Eliana at a discreet suite in the Four Seasons. When she arrived, her posture was tense, her expression wary. He tried to plead with her. Eliana, why did you let it go public? Her laugh was hollow. Don't be naive. That reporter cornered me. My silence was worthless once the SEC got involved. Are you aware they're asking for my financial records? If I end up indicted for fraud because of you, I'll sing like a canary. Nicholas clenched his jaw. I never intended for you to be implicated. Let me handle the SEC. I'll ensure your name is cleared. But please keep the media out of it. I'm trying to protect my wife and child. She eyed him skeptically. You never told me Vivian was pregnant. Her voice held a hint of regret. Had I known, I might have walked away sooner. Nicholas felt a surge of anger at her self-pity. Eliana, this has gone too far. The board is ready to oust me. My marriage is hanging by a thread. Just name your price for your cooperation. I'll pay whatever it takes. She raised an eyebrow. You think money solves everything. But you've built a reputation on power moves. Now the press wants blood, and the SEC wants to take down a big fish. If you can't offer me guaranteed safety, then my best bet is to protect myself by cutting a deal with them and with the media. He stood there, words choking in his throat. Eliana turned to leave, stiletto heels clicking on the polished floor. The door closed softly, and Nicholas was left staring at his reflection in the window. The private jet that once symbolized his dominion had now become a millstone around his neck, dragging him and everyone around him into scandal and potential ruin. Outside of the Manhattan social bubble, Vivian found respite in the quiet spaces of her childhood home in Connecticut. She often visited her mother, Catherine Chambers, a retired professor who lived in an ivy-covered cottage near Hartford. Sitting on the back porch, Vivian could almost pretend she was a little girl again, sipping lemonade while the summer breeze rustled the trees. But the illusion was fleeting. Her mind was consumed by the crisis unfolding back in Manhattan. She had just seen the tabloid headlines about the private jet. There was no escaping the humiliation that her husband's betrayal had become national fodder. Catherine sipped her tea, brow furrowed as she studied her daughter. You know, sometimes men think with their pride and lose sight of their vows. I'm not saying this to excuse Nicholas's behavior. But are you sure you're ready for a legal battle that could get ugly? Vivian swallowed hard. I can't just sit back and let him ruin everything we built. He put us, me and this baby, in jeopardy with his reckless actions. And the SEC investigation might expose more. I'm afraid of how deep this goes. Her mother reached over, covering Vivian's hand with her own. Then you must protect yourself and protect your child. The question is, do you still love him enough to give him a chance to make things right? Vivian's eyes welled up. Did she still love Nicholas? A part of her. Did she love the man who once wrote her poetry, who planned lavish surprise getaways just to see her smile? But that man seemed so distant now, overshadowed by the cunning businessman entangled with Eliana Stone. That afternoon she spoke with Tristan Zhao by phone. He laid out her options file for a legal separation, pursue a divorce, or demand that Nicholas sign an agreement giving her majority custody and financial security should the SEC investigation escalate. Tristan's advice was clear. Vivian, you hold more power than you think. Nicholas stands to lose far more if you take him to court. The board won't want a scandal-ridden CEO. If you choose to, you can force concessions out of him. Vivian felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Anger, betrayal, guilt, sorrow. Catherine's question echoed in her mind. Do you still love him enough to let him fix this? The straightforward answer was that she wasn't sure. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would not remain silent. She would not let Nicholas overshadow her rights or her child's future. As evening fell, she made a decision. She would return to Manhattan and confront Nicholas face to face with a proposed settlement. If he was serious about protecting their family, he would meet her terms. Otherwise, she would walk away no matter the cost. She would not be another powerless wife, overshadowed by a wealthy husband's misdeeds. The crossroads was set, and Vivian intended to choose her path with eyes wide open. Nicholas sat at the mahogany dining table, the remnants of a half-eaten dinner growing cold. His appetite had vanished hours ago, replaced by a consuming dread of what might happen next. Time felt suspended, the flickering city lights beyond the penthouse windows, casting dancing shadows against the walls. Suddenly the elevator chimed and Vivian stepped into the foyer. Her expression was resolute, not the tearful vulnerability he'd grown accustomed to. Nicholas rose. "Vivian," he began, voice tentative. She raised a hand to stop him. "We don't need to rehash the affair details. I'm here for a different reason." She pulled a slim folder from her handbag and placed it on the table. "I had Tristan draft this." Nicholas swallowed. "What is it?" "A provisional settlement agreement." She answered, her tone as cool as a lawyer delivering a verdict. "It spells out what happens if I file for legal separation or divorce, particularly regarding custody of our child's spousal support and my share of your assets." He opened the folder and skimmed the pages, eyes widening at some of the clauses. "You want the penthouse and a substantial share of Harrington Innovations stock." "Vivian, this is—" "You owe me that much, Nicholas," she cut in. "I supported you for years, sacrificed my career, and believed in you without question. If you tarnish our marriage and jeopardize our child's future, this is the price you'll pay." He flinched at the coldness in her voice. "I understand your anger, but you must see this from my perspective. My company is under investigation. If I sign this, the board will see it as a sign of instability. The stock value will drop. It could spark a panic." Vivian's eyes flickered with conflicting emotions. "That's not my fault. You created this mess." She gently placed a hand on her pregnant belly. "I'm thinking about our child's security. If you're indicted or forced to resign, you'll lose so much. I can't risk being left with nothing." Nicholas breathed deeply. Slowly, he closed the folder and ran his hand across the cover. "If I sign this, will you give me a chance to fix things?" Vivian hesitated, her eyes searching his. "That depends on your actions. You need to clear the air with the SEC, manage Eliana, and publicly acknowledge our marriage. No more secrets, no more hush-hush deals." He nodded, tears brimming at the corners of his eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes," he whispered. Without another word, Vivian turned and walked to the spare bedroom. Once she was gone, Nicholas sat there, the weight of the agreement seeming to press down like an anvil. Signing it might mean salvaging some form of trust. Refusing it might lead to a costly and humiliating court battle. Either way, his fate now lay in the fine print of that folder and in the unwavering resolve of the wife he had wronged. The air outside the SEC's New York regional office was thick with August heat and anticipation. A line of reporters had already begun to form across the street, cameras aimed like rifles, ready to capture the slow dismantling of a reputation once thought untouchable. Nicholas Harrington emerged from the back seat of a sleek black town car, flanked by his chief legal counsel Henry Caldwell and 2 junior associates. Dressed in a charcoal grey suit, every inch of him appeared immaculate, except for the strain around his eyes. It was the look of a man who had spent too many nights staring at the ceiling, wondering when everything would fall apart. Inside the hearing room was antiseptic windowless and devoid of comfort. At the long table, sat a panel of SEC officials, each with folders thick enough to suggest they already knew more than they were letting on. Among them was Grace Lee, the lead investigator, sharp, unblinking, and known for unearthing white-collar deception with surgical precision. Nicholas took his seat. A court reporter adjusted her machine. A bottle of water was placed in front of him. He didn't touch it. The oath was simple. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Nicholas replied, though the words caught briefly in his throat. Henry began speaking first in a calm, strategic tone. "My client is here in full cooperation. While recent headlines have painted a dramatic picture, we are confident this testimony will clarify misunderstandings. Mr. Harrington has nothing to hide." But Grace Lee wasn't here for Grace. She leaned forward, her voice steady and clipped. "Mr. Harrington, can you explain the series of wire transfers from your personal trust to Stone Enterprises? Several occurred within 48 hours of your company's major acquisition announcements. Would you categorize those as gifts, loans, or something else?" Nicholas swallowed hard. They were loans. Personal investments to support Ms. Stone's business initiatives. "Business initiatives," Grace repeated, tapping her pen. "Interesting, considering Stone Enterprises doesn't appear to operate any physical locations or provide services. Its listed address traces to a mail forwarding center in Soho." Nicholas felt heat rising under his collar. "Eliana Ms. Stone was in the process of launching a non-profit. I believed in her cause." Grace raised an eyebrow. "And the Gulfstream G650, purchased via subsidiaries connected to Harrington Innovations, transferred into her name. Does that fall under your philanthropic beliefs as well?" The room went quiet. Even Henry seemed to pause. Nicholas tried to recover. "That was a miscalculation. It was meant to facilitate her travel to charity events overseas. There was no intention of misleading the board or regulators." The junior investigator next to Grace leaned in and flipped a document toward the panel. "We have emails between Ms. Stone and one of your assistants discussing keeping things off the books." How do you explain that Nicholas's hands clenched under the table? "I never authorized that language. If it happened, it was a mistake by a staff member." The air tightened. Grace didn't blink. "So in summary, you claim the funds, the plane, and the shell companies all exist as coincidences, and the timing around stock volatility mere chance?" Nicholas faltered. "Yes. Coincidence." Grace sat back, satisfied with the discomfort her silence produced. Then she leaned in one last time. "Mr. Harrington, this is not a trial yet. But you should understand, we are prepared to pursue further action. If we discover that your personal relationships were used to conceal material financial transactions, you won't just be explaining yourself in this room. You'll be doing so under federal indictment." The words hit like a gavel. When the questioning ended, Nicholas stepped into the hallway, drenched in sweat beneath his polished suit. Henry walked beside him, jaw tight. "Nothing's definitive yet," Henry muttered. "But they're closing in. We need to get ahead of this fast." Outside, the sunlight was blinding. Flash bulbs erupted the second Nicholas appeared. Reporters shouted questions, but he kept walking, expression unreadable. And then, just beyond the press line, he saw her. Vivian stood quietly, her coat folded neatly over her rounded belly. Her eyes met his, not with hatred, not with pity, but something colder clarity. The kind that no lie could pierce. She nodded almost imperceptibly, then turned and left. Nicholas didn't call after her. He couldn't, because at that moment, he understood he hadn't just been under oath in front of the SEC. He'd been under oath before the woman whose trust he had shattered, and in both courts, he was failing. The day Manhattan Family Court summoned the Harringtons, the city seemed to mirror their turmoil, overcast skies, cold drizzle, and a wind that cut through coats and certainty alike. Vivian sat in the back seat of her legal counsel's car, hands gently folded over her rounded belly, her heart steady, but her mind a whirlwind. In her tailored navy dress and cream coat, she looked the part of elegance, but underneath, she was bracing for war. Nicholas, on the other hand, arrived separately with his legal team. Face drawn, suit pressed, but soaked at the edges from the rain. The once revered tech mogul now moved with the stiffness of a man walking into his own reckoning. His wife, the woman who once toasted his Forbes cover in Santorini, was now his opponent in a courtroom that would define more than custody. It would define character. Cameras flashed in the foyer. The tabloids had already christened the event the billionaire marriage collapse of the year. Inside, fluorescent lights and the low murmur of clerks filled the courtroom with a sterile judicial hush. But beneath the procedural tone, hearts thundered. Judge Wallace, known for his impartial but razor-sharp mind, presided from the bench, glancing between the two parties with practiced observation. Vivian rose first. At her side stood Tristan Zhao, her family attorney, sharp as ever, his calm anchoring her presence. "Your Honor," Tristan began, "we are here today because my client, Mrs. Vivian Harrington, must safeguard not only her unborn child's well-being, but also her own future in light of serious allegations surrounding Mr. Harrington's conduct. These are not just emotional breaches. They carry financial, legal, and reputational consequences. He presented exhibits the Gulfstream G650 invoice wire transfers to Eliana's companies and press clippings outlining SEC scrutiny. This is not a case of simple infidelity, he emphasized. This is a man whose recklessness threatens the foundation of a family. Then Vivian took the stand. She didn't shake. Her voice, though soft, cut through the courtroom like crystal. "I am not here to punish Nicholas," she said, "but to protect my child. I stood by him as he built an empire. I turned down board seats and job offers to raise a family with him. But when I discovered the jet, the lies, the secrets woven into our finances, I realized I could no longer trust him to put family first." She paused, one hand resting on her belly. "This child will be born into a storm I did not create. And so I ask this court for separation custody and clear boundaries. I need to know I'm not tied to a future of consequences that I didn't choose." Nicholas, listening, felt something tear quietly within. Vivian wasn't attacking him. She was grieving him. Grieving the man he used to be. And somehow that hurt more than any insult could. His attorney, Deborah Montague, rose her tone polished but defensive. "Mr. Harrington has not been charged with any crimes. He has taken responsibility and signed a provisional agreement to provide for his wife and unborn child. He regrets the mistakes he made, and he is committed to restoring stability." When Nicholas took the stand, his usual confidence faltered. "I've made catastrophic decisions," he admitted. "I lost my way. I hurt the woman who believed in me more than anyone. But I love my family. I love my wife. I want to be a father. Please don't punish my child for my failures." He looked directly at Vivian, eyes glossy with unspoken regret. "Vivian, if there's anything left to save, I'll fight for it." But Judge Wallace had heard enough. He removed his glasses slowly and addressed the court in a measured tone. "This court does not render decisions based on emotion alone, but on impact, risk, and precedent. While Mr. Harrington has not yet been criminally charged, the court finds the financial irregularities troubling, especially the use of marital assets for extramarital endeavors." He looked at Vivian. "Given your condition and the uncertainty surrounding Mr. Harrington's legal future, the court grants your petition for separation with sole custody, awarded until further review." A collective breath left the courtroom. However, the judge continued, "I order a mediation period before any permanent divorce is granted. Both parties are encouraged to seek counseling for the sake of their child, if not for reconciliation." The gavel fell with finality. Outside, flashbulbs exploded. Nicholas exited with his head down. Vivian walked out, composed, escorted by Tristan, her hand instinctively cradling her stomach. That night, Nicholas returned to an empty penthouse, silence pressing down like a judgment of its own. Vivian, meanwhile, sat by her mother's side in Connecticut, watching news coverage she never asked for. She had won the hearing, but not without cost. And somewhere deep within both of them, the truth lingered like an echo power may buy silence, but it can never buy back trust. And the court, cold and impartial, had just made that truth official. Autumn descended on Manhattan with a crisp chill. Leaves in Central Park turned burnished gold, a stark contrast to the somber mood that enveloped Nicholas. The separation hearing had concluded, leaving him in a purgatory of legal limbo. Harrington Innovations Board pressured him to step down as CEO temporarily until the investigations concluded. Eliana Stone had vanished from public sight, rumored to be negotiating a quiet settlement of her own with the SEC. In the midst of this maelstrom, Vivian's pregnancy progressed. She was nearing her 7th month, glowing despite the emotional upheaval. One day she agreed to meet Nicholas at a neutral location, her lawyer's conference room, under the pretense of finalizing some financial details. Nicholas arrived early, heart-pounding, half hoping for a chance at honest conversation. When Vivian entered, her expression was guarded but not hostile. They sat at a polished wooden table, a fruit platter and water glasses placed between them. Lawyers hovered in the background. But Tristan made an excuse to step out, leaving them momentarily alone. Nicholas mustered his courage. "Vivian, I know I can't undo what's happened, but I still believe we can be a family for our child." She studied him quietly, absent-mindedly, placing a hand on her belly. "Nicholas, I've been to the doctor. The baby's healthy. That's the most important thing to me. I won't let anything threaten that." Her voice was tinged with sadness. "But as for us, I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were. Your affair, the secrets, they're scars that might never fully heal." He felt tears prick at his eyes. "I'll do anything, Vivian. I'll sign any agreement you want. I'll cooperate fully with the SEC. Step down from the company for good if necessary. I don't want to lose you." Her eyes glistened, but she remained composed. "You've already lost part of me, Nicholas, and I don't say that to be cruel. It's the reality. But you might be able to earn back my respect if you can prove you've truly changed." Just then, Tristan stepped back into the room with a gentle knock. "I'm sorry to interrupt. The final paperwork is ready." Vivian sighed, stood up, and walked toward the door, but not before pausing. She turned to Nicholas, her voice soft yet resolute. "Focus on resolving your legal issues. Get the help you need. Let's bring this child into a world without fear, Then maybe we'll see if there's a chance for us." As she left, Nicholas clutched the edge of the table, emotions crashing over him in waves. He was neither free nor entirely condemned. The fate of his marriage, his reputation, and even his future as a father rested on his ability to atone for past sins. For now he would stand on the precipice of redemption, heart-pounding, hoping that one day the scales might tip in his favor, and that Vivian would find it in her heart to forgive him. 6 months later, a hush fell over a pristine maternity suite at Mount Sinai Hospital. It was the day that would rewrite the destinies of Nicholas and Vivian Harrington. Vivian was in labor, surrounded by an aura of calm determination. Tristan and Catherine, her mother, stood by for moral support. After hours of tense waiting, Nicholas arrived. He looked visibly drained, but resolute. The SEC investigation had finally concluded, leading to a negotiated settlement in which Nicholas admitted to minor infractions, but avoided criminal charges. He had also resigned from Harrington Innovations, relinquishing his CEO title in exchange for a consultancy role. The board accepted his departure as a necessary act to restore the company's public image. Though Vivian had held firm on their legal separation, she had allowed Nicholas the opportunity to be present for the birth of their child. The baby's arrival brought a fragile sense of hope, albeit tinted with the knowledge of everything that had transpired. In the hallway, Nicholas paced anxiously, memories flooding his mind, his first date with Vivian, their wedding day, the day he discovered she was pregnant. Each memory was a bittersweet reminder of how far they had strayed from their dream. The door to the maternity suite opened, and Catherine beckoned him inside. Vivian lay reclined, sweat on her brow, but her face softened when she saw him. "The baby's almost here," she said, breathless between contractions. Nicholas rushed to her side, gently taking her hand. "You're doing amazing," he whispered, voice trembling with emotion. She squeezed his hand, and for a moment, all grudges, all scandals, seemed to dissolve in the face of new life. It happened in a rush, the final push, the cry of a newborn echoing in the room. A son 8 pounds of possibility. A hush fell as the medical staff placed the baby in Vivian's arms. Nicholas felt tears spill down his cheeks. Vivian's face lit up with a radiant glow he hadn't seen in a long time. When a nurse asked if the father wanted to hold the baby, Vivian glanced at Nicholas and nodded. Carefully he cradled his son, a tiny, fragile being who knew nothing of private jets or SEC hearings, nothing of betrayal or heartbreak. In that moment, Nicholas felt humbled, awed, and overwhelmed by the gravity of fatherhood. Later, when the baby was cleaned and swaddled, and Vivian rested Nicholas, stepped into the quiet hallway. His phone buzzed an email from Tristan's office, finalizing details of the separation agreement. The terms were generous to Vivian, as they should be. Nicholas had no regrets. The only thought that mattered now was that he had a son who deserved better than the mistakes of his father. He heard a soft voice behind him. "You can come back in if you like." Vivian stood in the doorway, hair-disheveled exhaustion etched on her face, yet she radiated a quiet strength. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice almost trembling. She nodded. "This baby is ours, and I want him to know his father, even if—" Her voice trailed off. Perhaps she was thinking of what the future would hold for them. Would they remain separated forever? Or was there a glimmer of reconciliation? Nicholas followed her inside the weight of the world, feeling just a bit lighter than before. He took a seat next to Vivian, watching their son's tiny chest rise and fall. The child's eyes fluttered, taking in the world for the first time. In that shared silence, father and mother, once broken by betrayal, found a fleeting moment of unity. No matter what the days ahead held, court hearings, settlement negotiations, or personal therapy sessions. This was a new beginning. It might not be a fairy tale ending, but it was real. It was honest. And perhaps for Nicholas and Vivian Harrington, that was a step closer to redemption than either had dared to hope. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey of passion, betrayal, and the fight for redemption. The tangled webs of Nicholas Harrington's life serve as a stark reminder that no amount of wealth or power can shield us from the consequences of our actions. From a hidden mistress and an extravagant private jet, to legal showdowns and a child's birth that changed everything. Our story reveals how trust once broken can take a lifetime to rebuild. Yet in the darkest moments, hope may still emerge if one chooses humility and honesty.